Good evening and welcome to Grace Gavel, where truth meets compassion. My name is Buffy. I'm an 18-year criminal defense attorney, as well as a compassionate person who will share these stories in a victim-centered approach with compassion and humility and honesty as well. This is about the Hall Mills murders, evidence, power, and a trial that failed. Two bodies beneath a crabapple tree, a love letter placed between them. A crime scene trampled by spectators. This case didn't fail because the truth was unknowable. It failed because power, class, and spectacle outweighed evidence. Let's talk about the victims and their circumstances. Edward Hall was an Episcopal priest, financially supported by his wealthy wife's family, and engaged in a secret affair with Eleanor Mills. Eleanor Mills was a choir singer, married, working class, pregnant at the time of death, likely Hall's child, but who knows because DNA wasn't given at that time. I believe Ms. Mills was also married So circumstances, the bodies were discovered September 14th, 1922, positioned deliberately. Their throats were cut, there were gunshot wounds, and love letters arranged between the bodies. This suggests staging, not spontaneous violence. And the fact that love letters were between the two of them means that someone wanted people to know that they had an affair and that they were guilty, right? Which almost points to either her husband or his spouse. What we know that the victims knew each other intimately, that the scene was manipulated post-mortem, and the crime scene was unsecured and therefore contaminated at some point. Witnesses reported suspicious activity the night of the murders, and multiple individuals had motive and opportunity. Well, we don't know. We don't know who placed the letters, and if we're thinking about, when was that? 1922. I'm sure we're not really thinking about fingerprints or forensics. There was an exact sequence of the deaths, whether multiple perpetrators were involved, why no immediate arrests occurred, and whether evidence was intentionally mishandled. Let's talk about the suspects and motives. Frances Hall, the wife, her potential motive was humiliation, financial threat, and pregnancy revelation. The issue with that is motive existed, but physical evidence was compromised beyond prosecutorial certainty. So it almost closed the door on the ability to get justice for these victims. Frances Hall's brothers, they had a potential motive. They wanted to protect their family's reputation. They wanted financial dependency on Hall's wife. And then there was prior threats allegedly made. The legal issue there is class privilege, which oftentimes the wealthy do tend to escape justice a lot of times. And the lack of preserved evidence. Unknown third party. Maybe they hired violence, maybe accomplices to staging. This was speculative due to a destroyed crime scene, so there's no way to fully know. And let's talk about the investigative failures. There was no perimeter secured. Evidence was trampled by crowds, being into the sensationalism of the crime. Witness statements were delayed. Rumors treated as testimony, and moral judgment substituted for forensic rigor. So ultimately, these people were people that were having an affair. So essentially, the thought may have been they deserved exactly what they got. And this was procedural negligence, even by 1920 standards. Let's talk about the trial and the legal analysis here. The charges were murder, and the outcome, unfortunately, was acquittal. Why the case collapsed legally? The chain of custody was destroyed. For those of you that aren't familiar with chain of custody is, it's a means by which you know each step of the process that the evidence has gone through. So, for instance, if there is evidence that is not bagged and tagged essentially and cataloged, you want to know that no one else has finagled or tampered with the evidence in any way. And a lot of the cases have those issues, such as the O.J. Simpson case. There was an issue because they covered up the bodies with a sheet, so that kind of caused some issues and some kind of inconsistencies with what it should have been. Also, evidence was tainted. The trial focused on scandal, not on the facts, which is clearly not a legal standard, and that is something that should be avoided at all costs. Defense exploited a reasonable doubt created by investigative failures, and of course they did. I mean, that's what any logical, reasonable criminal defense attorney would do. Exploit what the police have done wrong. O.J. Simpson benefited from that as well. He also benefited from claiming that Furman was a racist. And he was able to convey that to the jury, and the jury believed that. This is a classic example of reasonable doubt manufactured by incompetence. And if the police aren't able to do their job effectively, that's exactly where the defense attorneys are going to go every single time. So why this case still matters? Because it shows how evidence can exist, yet be unusable. That power shields suspects, and it can. And trials can become morality plays instead of fact-finding missions. And ultimately, that's where the rape shield law comes in as well. Not that this case had anything to do with sexual assault, but that used to be something that rested a lot on morality, and there was always the blame the victim defense. Now there are very specific parameters on what you can use to try to question the victim of a sexual assault, which is really good, honestly. So follow Grace and Gavel for more investigative analysis where evidence, not spectacle, takes center stage. And as I always say at the end of these episodes, that these people were real victims, and who are we to judge what choices they made? That doesn't make them any less of victims. They were loved by others, they were missed by others, and their life was taken from them. So ultimately, I ask that if you like what we're doing here, please feel free to like and subscribe. And if you have certain cases that you're interested in, feel free to let me know. I definitely am looking for other cases to cover. And thanks for tuning in. I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.